The first siren came at 3:47 p.m. Sarah remembered the exact moment because she was in line at the pharmacy, trying to buy her mother's blood pressure medication. The overhead news was already grim, murmuring about escalating tensions and evacuation advisories. But no one truly believed it would happen. Not here, not in their city. And then, the siren screamed. People froze, some staring blankly at their phones, others murmuring, "It's probably a test." But Sarah noticed something different. The fear in the pharmacist's eyes as he locked the cash register and dropped behind the counter. Someone shouted, "It's real! They launched!" Chaos erupted. Sarah abandoned the prescription and bolted for the door, heart pounding. Outside, the streets pulsed with panic, cars clogged intersections, horns blaring as people shoved each other in every direction. A low, gut-churning rumble rolled through the earth beneath her feet, as if the world itself was bracing for what was coming. Somewhere to the south, the first bomb hit. The distant glow lit the horizon, turning the fading afternoon into a haunting dusk. A massive plume of black and red rose like a god of wrath, growing impossibly larger with each passing second. The shockwave hadn't reached them yet, but everyone knew it was coming. Sarah's apartment was 10 blocks away. If she ran, maybe she could make it to the basement. A man knocked into her, sending her stumbling. "Out of the way!" he yelled, clutching an overstuffed backpack. The world dissolved into chaos as people turned feral. Stores were smashed open. Men and women grabbed water, food, and anything else they could carry. Someone wielded a crowbar, warding off others as they ransacked a gas station. Sarah veered down an alley, desperate to escape the growing violence. Her thoughts raced as fast as her legs. She needed a plan. She needed shelter. But most of all, she needed to get home. By the time she reached her apartment, the sky had darkened unnaturally, the ash cloud from the bomb blotting out the sun. She fumbled with her keys, breathless, her hands shaking so violently she dropped them twice. "Come on," she hissed, finally forcing the door open. Her mother was in the living room, watching the news, her face pale as milk. The anchor's voice trembled, saying, "If you are within 50 miles of the blast zone, seek immediate shelter. Close all doors and windows," and the television cut to static. "We need to get to the basement," Sarah said, grabbing her mother's arm. "But your father," her mom protested. Sarah's stomach sank. Her father worked downtown, miles closer to the blast. There was no time to hope he'd made it out. Another rumble vibrated the walls, a haunting prelude to the shockwave she knew was on its way. "We have to go now," she said, pulling her mother toward the stairs. The basement was a shared space for tenants, dimly lit and lined with storage units. A handful of neighbors were already huddled inside, wide-eyed and clutching their loved ones. The air was thick with fear. "What do we do?" a young man asked. He was holding a baseball bat, though against what? Sarah had no idea. "Seal the door," someone else shouted. Sarah found an old mattress leaning against a wall and helped others shove it against the small, high window. It wouldn't block radiation or the eventual fallout, but it felt better than doing nothing. The air turned suffocatingly still. Everyone waited. The sound of footsteps and distant yelling from above faded. And then, the shockwave hit. The ground lurched violently, throwing Sarah and others to the floor. The lights flickered, the dim bulb above them swinging wildly before plunging the room into darkness. Screams filled the basement as debris rained down from the ceiling. For an eternity, the earth seemed to groan, as though the city itself were dying. When the shaking finally stopped, all that remained was the sound of ragged breathing and muffled sobbing. "Is everyone okay?" someone asked, their voice barely audible over the ringing in Sarah's ears. She fumbled for her flashlight and turned it on, the weak beam illuminating dust-choked faces. Her mother was crouched beside her, eyes wide and unblinking. "We're alive," Sarah whispered, but the word felt hollow. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. The air grew heavier, hotter. People whispered, speculating wildly about what was happening outside. "We can't stay down here forever," a man muttered. "We need supplies." "I hear is nothing out there but death," a woman snapped. They argued, voices rising until the door to the basement creaked. Everyone froze. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered. The door creaked again, slower this time. A faint, shuffling sound followed. "Maybe it's someone looking for shelter," her mother said, but her voice lacked conviction. The young man with the bat held it aloft, stepping toward the door. "Hello?" he called out. There was no response. "Don't open it," Sarah hissed. But it was too late. He unlatched the door and pulled it open just enough to peer outside. The weak beam of Sarah's flashlight illuminated a portion of the stairwell beyond. At first, there was nothing. And then a figure stumbled into view, its movements jerky and unnatural. Its clothes were tattered and its skin was blistered and peeling as if it had been boiled alive. But its eyes glowed faintly, like embers. The man with the bat gasped, stepping back. The figure turned its head sharply toward the sound, letting out a low, guttural groan. More shuffling came from the stairwell. Another figure appeared, then another. "They're coming," someone screamed. Panic erupted as the first figure lunged forward, emitting an inhuman screech. The man swung his bat, connecting with a sickening crack, but the creature barely flinched. Sarah grabbed her mother and dragged her toward the farthest corner of the room. She had no weapons, no plan, just raw, primal terror. The creatures poured in, their glowing eyes casting an eerie light on the walls. They moved with a strange coordination, as if drawn by some unspoken command. The man with the bat fell first, overwhelmed by sheer numbers. His screams were brief, replaced by the wet sound of tearing flesh. Sarah clutched her mother tightly, whispering, "Don't make a sound. Don't move." The creatures seemed to ignore them at first, focusing on the others who fought or ran. But then one of them stopped, tilting its head toward their corner. Its glowing eyes locked onto Sarah's. For a moment, time seemed to freeze, then it charged. Sarah braced herself, screaming, as darkness consumed them.